My name is Myra Nolan, and I'm 34 years old. 2 months ago, my husband looked me in the eyes and said, "My friends think you're not good enough for me. I could do better." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said 5 words. Then go do better. That same day, I quietly canceled our $12,000 anniversary trip. I canceled the $4,500 watch I'd ordered for his birthday. And I canceled something else, something he didn't know I had the power to take away. See, for 7 years, I designed award-winning hotels while my husband's family called me the decorator. I'd worked 2,400 hours on their biggest project while they planned to take all the credit. 2 weeks after I said those 5 words, at 2 a.m., my husband's best friend called me sobbing, "Please answer. Something happened tonight, and it's about you." Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It all started 7 years ago, the day I said I do to Daniel Whitmore. 7 years of marriage to Daniel Whitmore taught me one thing. There's a difference between being in a family and being part of one. Daniel was the only son of Richard Whitmore, founder and CEO of Whitmore Properties, a boutique real estate development firm based in Portland, Oregon. The Whitmores weren't old money, but they acted like it. 3 generations of property deals had given them a house in West Hills, a membership at the Portland Golf Club, and the unshakable belief that their name meant something. I learned my place early. Every month, Richard and Patricia Whitmore hosted a family dinner at their 12,000 square foot home overlooking the city. 24 dinners a year. I attended every single one, and every single time I was seated at the far end of the table, closest to the kitchen. "So you can help clear the plates, dear," Patricia had explained the first time, smiling like she was doing me a favor. "It's just easier." I was an interior architect. I had designed boutique hotels featured in Architectural Digest. But at that table, I was the help. Daniel never corrected the seating arrangement. When colleagues asked about his wife at company events, he'd say, "This is Myra," never, "This is Myra, she's an interior architect," just Myra. Like I was an accessory he'd picked up somewhere and couldn't quite remember the brand of. Thanksgiving 2022 was when I should have seen it clearly. I mentioned a boutique hotel project I'd just completed in the Pearl District. 14 months of work. A feature in a national design magazine. Patricia cut me off mid-sentence. "Oh, you're so good at decorating things, Myra. But Daniel, he's the one who really understands business." I smiled. I nodded. I passed the gravy. That was my first mistake. In March 2023, Richard Whitmore announced his legacy project, the Whitmore Grand, a 47-room boutique hotel in Portland's Pearl District. $4.2 million budget. Grand opening planned for November 2024. Time to coincide with the Pacific Northwest Design Conference, when every architect, developer, and design journalist in the region would be in town. Richard wanted it to be perfect. He wanted it to cement the Whitmore name in Portland's hospitality industry for the next 50 years. And he wanted me to design it. For free. "It's a family project, Myra," he said at dinner, 3 days after the announcement. "If it succeeds, it'll be good for your little career too. People will know the Whitmore name, and by extension, yours." By extension, I should have said no. Instead, I asked for a contract. Richard's face tightened. Family doesn't need paperwork. But the company's lawyer, a cautious man named Howard Price, not Marcus, advised that documentation would protect Whitmore Properties in case of any disputes down the line. So on March 15, 2023, I signed a 12-page agreement. I read every clause. Richard didn't. Clause 7.3 stated, "All designs created by Myra Nolan remain her intellectual property until written approval is granted for commercial use." Standard language in my industry. Standard protection for any designer working on a major project. Richard signed it without a second glance. Daniel witnessed it. "This is family," Richard muttered as he initialed the last page. "What's there to worry about?" Over the next 14 months, I poured 2,400 hours into the Whitmore Grand, 47 unique room concepts, 312 emails coordinating with contractors, vendors, and the Whitmore Properties team. Every email had the same header. From Myra Nolan, lead interior designer. Every design file I sent was a low-resolution preview, with a watermark. The original stayed on my laptop. If I'm being honest, the hotel project wasn't the first time I made myself smaller for the Whitmores. It was just the most expensive. There was Daniel's birthday, a tradition I maintained for 7 years. Every April, I planned a dinner party for 30 guests at our home. I hired caterers. I curated the guest list. I made sure his golf buddies had the imported scotch they liked, and his mother had her favorite orchids on the table. Daniel forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. 2021, 2022, 2023. I've been swamped at work, babe, he said each time, like it explained everything. Like I wasn't working too. Then there were the nights his friends came over unannounced. Marcus Webb, Tyler Grant, Kevin Shaw. They'd settle into our living room like they owned it, talking about investments and golf handicaps while I fetched drinks and cleared plates. No one said thank you. No one asked about my work. I told myself it was fine. I told myself this was just how things were. In September 2023, I was invited to speak at the Oregon Society of Interior Architects annual conference. It was a significant honor, recognition from my professional peers for a decade of work. I asked Daniel to come. "I've got something more important," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "Besides, it's just a small talk thing, right?" I went alone. I delivered my presentation to 300 industry professionals. I talked about boutique hospitality design and sustainable material sourcing. Afterward, Eleanor Vance, former president of the society and my mentor since I was an intern, took a photo with me and posted it to LinkedIn. "Proud of my former mentee at Myra Nolan," she wrote, "a rising voice in boutique hospitality design." The post got 400 likes. Daniel never saw it. But I saved the screenshot. I didn't know why at the time. Now I do. Saturday, October 26th, 2024, 7:14 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was looking at the clock when Daniel walked through the front door. He'd been at the Portland Golf Club all afternoon with Marcus, Tyler, and Kevin, his inner circle, the men whose opinions mattered more to him than mine ever had. He was still wearing his golf shoes. He tracked grass across the hardwood floors I'd had refinished 6 months earlier. "You won't believe what Marcus said today," Daniel announced, dropping onto the couch with a grin. I was in the kitchen finishing prep for dinner. "What?" "He asked why I married you." I set down the knife I was holding, slowly. Daniel laughed, oblivious. "Tyler said I could have done way better, like model level better." I waited. I waited for him to say he'd defended me, that he'd told them they were wrong, that he was lucky to have me. He shrugged. "Honestly, I kind of see their point sometimes." He grabbed the remote, eyes already on the TV. "My friends think you're not good enough for me. And yeah, I could do better." 7 years. 7 years of forgotten birthdays and unacknowledged work, and being seated next to the kitchen at family dinners. 7 years of making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. And now this, said casually, like he was commenting on the weather. I stood there for exactly 7 seconds. I counted. Then I said, "Then go do better." Daniel looked up, confused. He laughed, uncertain this time. "Come on, babe, you know I'm just saying. I heard what you said." I turned and walked upstairs. I closed the door to my home office. I didn't cry. For the first time in 7 years, I was done crying for Daniel Whitmore. That night, I sat in my home office until 2 a.m. The room was small. Just a desk, a drafting table, and a wall of design books I'd collected over 11 years. Daniel called it my hobby corner. The Whitmores called it unnecessary. But this room had produced every concept for the Whitmore Grand. Every sketch, every rendering. I opened my laptop and stared at the project files. 14 months of work, 2,400 hours, 47 room concepts that would make or break the Whitmore family's reputation in Portland's hospitality industry, and not once had anyone said my name. I pulled up the contract I'd signed in March 2023, scrolled to clause 7.3. All designs created by Myra Nolan remain her intellectual property until written approval is granted for commercial use. I read it 3 times. Then I opened a new browser tab and searched for intellectual property attorneys in Portland. The first result was a woman named Sarah Chen. I scrolled past. The second was a firm called Hartwell & Associates. I bookmarked it. At 2:47 a.m., I made a list. If I stayed silent, I would lose my professional reputation. The Whitmores would take credit forever. My mental health. 7 years of swallowed anger was already showing cracks. My future. If Daniel genuinely believed I wasn't good enough, this marriage was already dead. At 3:15 a.m., I made another list. If I stopped giving, the Whitmores couldn't use my designs without my permission. Daniel would finally have to see me. I would finally see myself. I closed my laptop. For the first time in 7 years, I asked myself a question I'd been too afraid to ask. What happens when I stop giving them everything? I was about to find out. Sunday, October 27th, 2024. Daniel slept until noon. He always did after golf days. By then, I had already made 3 phone calls. 8:15 a.m. I called the Four Seasons Maui and canceled our 8-year anniversary trip. 5 nights, ocean view suite, couples massage package, total cost $12,400. They refunded 80% to my personal credit card, the one Daniel didn't know I'd kept separate. 9:30 a.m. I emailed Carlson & Sons Jewelers and canceled the custom Omega Seamaster I'd ordered for Daniel's birthday. $4,500. Full refund, since it hadn't shipped yet. 10:20 a.m. I sent a brief message to Sarah Hartwell at Hartwell & Associates, the intellectual property attorney I'd found the night before. I need advice regarding clause 7.3 of a design contract. When can we speak? She replied within an hour. Monday, 9 a.m. Bring the original agreement and all related correspondence. By the time Daniel stumbled downstairs for coffee, I was sitting at the kitchen table reading the Sunday paper. Morning, he mumbled, not looking at me. Morning. He poured himself coffee, scrolled through his phone, and left to watch football in the den. He didn't mention what he'd said the night before. He didn't apologize. He didn't even seem to remember. That afternoon, while Daniel shouted at a Seahawks game, I received another email. Sarah Hartwell had done a preliminary review of my contract summary. Ms. Nolan, she wrote, based on what you've described, Clause 7.3 is clear. Your designs remain your intellectual property. Whitmore Properties cannot use them for any commercial purpose, marketing, press releases, grand opening materials, without your written consent. They have no legal leverage if you choose to withhold approval. I read the email twice. Then I smiled for the first time in 2 days. 19 days until the grand opening. The Whitmore Grand was scheduled to launch on Friday, November 15, 2024, at 6 p.m. 200 invitations had already been sent. I knew because Patricia had made me address half of them by hand. Your handwriting is so pretty, Myra. The guest list read like a who's who of Pacific Northwest real estate and design. Investors, developers, city council members, journalists from Portland Monthly and Architectural Digest, representatives from the Oregon Society of Interior Architects. Tristan Holt, the project's primary investor at $1.8 million, had confirmed his attendance 3 weeks ago. So had Eleanor Vance, my mentor, who'd been invited as an industry representative. Richard Whitmore had been preparing for this night for 18 months. It was his crowning achievement. The project that would prove Whitmore Properties was more than just a family operation. Daniel came home that Monday glowing. "Dad says this is going to change everything," he told me, loosening his tie. "The Whitmore Grand is going to put us on the map. Did you know Bloomberg is sending someone?" "Bloomberg? That's exciting," I said. "Everything has to be perfect." Dad's been on the phone with the marketing team all day. They're finalizing the press materials, the signage, the whole package. I paused. "Did they mention the interior design credits?" Daniel shrugged. "I think they're going with designed by the Whitmore Properties team. Cleaner branding, cleaner branding. 2,400 hours, 47 rooms, 312 emails, and I would be credited as the Whitmore Properties team." "Sounds great," I said. Daniel nodded, already checking his phone. He had no idea that every piece of marketing collateral, every press release, every photograph of those interiors would require my written consent, and I hadn't signed anything. Monday, October 28th, 2024. Whitmore Properties Headquarters, downtown Portland. Richard called a family meeting in the main conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. Dark mahogany table, 12 leather chairs, a portrait of Richard's father, the original Whitmore, hanging on the back wall. Present, Richard, Patricia, Daniel, and me. The agenda: grand opening logistics. Richard handed out printed schedules like we were employees. "Daniel, you'll deliver the welcome address. Patricia, you'll manage VIP hospitality. And Myra," he glanced at me like he'd almost forgotten I was there, "you'll stand next to Daniel during the ribbon cutting. Smile. Look supportive." I looked at the schedule. My name appeared once, in parentheses, Mrs. Daniel Whitmore. "I'm the lead interior designer," I said. "Is that reflected anywhere in the program?" Patricia sighed. "Myra, dear, this is a business event." "Interior design is a business." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Babe, let's not make this complicated." "I'm not making it complicated, I'm stating a fact." I kept my voice even. "I designed every room in that hotel, 2,400 hours, 47 concepts, 312 emails. Shouldn't that be acknowledged somewhere?" Silence. Richard's jaw tightened. "You contributed. We're grateful. But this is about the Whitmore brand, not individual credit." "I'm not asking for individual credit. I'm asking to be mentioned at all." Daniel leaned toward me. "You're being difficult." "I'm being accurate." More silence. Patricia examined her manicure. Richard checked his watch. Finally, Richard spoke. "We'll discuss it later. For now, stick to the plan." The meeting ended. We filed out. In the elevator, Daniel gripped my arm, not hard, but firm. "What was that?" he hissed. "The truth," I said. He didn't speak to me the rest of the night. The drive home was 17 minutes of silence. Daniel didn't turn on the radio. He didn't make small talk about dinner plans or weekend schedules. He gripped the steering wheel like it had personally offended him. 3 blocks from our house, he finally spoke. "You embarrassed my father." I looked at him. I asked a question. "You threw numbers at him. 2,400 hours, 47 concepts, like you were keeping score." "It's not a score, Daniel. It's my work." He pulled into the driveway harder than necessary. "You know how he is. He doesn't like being challenged in front of people." "I'm people now? I thought I was family." Daniel killed the engine. For a moment he just sat there, staring at the garage door. "Look," he said, softer now, "this is important to Dad, to the company, to us. Can you just let it go for the next 3 weeks? Just be supportive?" "I've been supportive for 7 years. And now you're choosing this moment to stop?" I unbuckled my seatbelt. "I'm choosing this moment to ask for what I deserve." He shook his head. "You always make everything about you." I stopped with my hand on the door. "When has anything ever been about me, Daniel? Name one time." He couldn't. That night, Daniel slept in the guest room. It was the first time in 7 years he hadn't shared my bed. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence where his breathing should have been. I thought about calling my mother. I thought about calling Eleanor. I thought about packing a bag. Instead, I thought about something Eleanor had once told me during my internship. The people who dismiss you most easily are the ones who've never had to earn what they have. The Whitmores had never had to earn me. Maybe it was time they did. Wednesday, October 30th, 2024. I came home at 6:30 p.m. after a long day at my own studio. Yes, I had a studio, a small office in the Alberta Arts District where I took freelance projects that weren't family obligations. The moment I opened the front door, I heard the laughter. Male laughter, multiple voices, coming from my living room. Daniel hadn't mentioned he was having people over. I set my bag down quietly and walked toward the voices. There they were. Marcus Webb, Tyler Grant, Kevin Shaw, the same 3 men who'd told Daniel he could do better than me. They were sprawled across my furniture, bottles of imported beer on my coffee table, golf on the muted TV. And she actually asked for credit, Daniel was saying, in front of my dad. Can you believe it? Tyler snorted. Classic. Kevin shook his head. Some people just can't be grateful. My mom almost lost it, Daniel continued. She called me after and said, "Who does she think she is?" She thinks she's more than a +1, Tyler said, laughing. That's her problem. I stood in the doorway. Daniel noticed me first. Hey, babe. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Didn't know you'd be home so early. Marcus looked up. He was the only one who didn't laugh. His expression was harder to read, curious maybe, uncomfortable. I'm heading out, I said evenly. I have work to do. On what? Kevin smirked. More decorating? I grabbed my keys from the hall table. Something like that. I didn't look at Daniel as I left. I didn't need to. But I noticed Marcus watching me as I walked out the door. He didn't say anything. I wondered later what he was thinking. It would take 2 weeks to find out. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot of a coffee shop on Division Street and called Eleanor Vance. She answered on the second ring. Myra, it's been too long. What's going on? Eleanor was 62 years old, had been president of the Oregon Society of Interior Architects twice, and had exactly 0 patience for people who didn't respect talent. She'd mentored me since I was a 23-year-old intern making $17 an hour. I told her everything. The meeting at Whitmore Properties, Daniel's reaction, the Whitmore Properties team branding, the contract sitting on my laptop with Clause 7.3 still unexercised. I didn't dramatize. I just stated facts. When I finished, Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Let me make sure I understand, she said. You designed the entire interior of a $4 million hotel. You have a signed contract giving you ownership of those designs until you provide written consent, and they're planning to open in 3 weeks without even mentioning your name? That's correct. And your husband, who witnessed that contract, is siding with his father. Yes. Another pause. Myra, do you understand what you have? I think so. You have the contract, you have the emails, 312 of them, with your name in the header. You have the original files with your watermark. They have nothing but assumption. I know. So what do you want to do? I watched rain streak down the windshield. I want to be acknowledged, publicly, at the opening. And I want them to understand that I'm not asking, I'm requiring. Eleanor's voice warmed. I'll be there, you know. They invited me as an industry representative. I know. If you need someone to confirm what you're saying, I will, publicly, if necessary. I closed my eyes. Thank you, Eleanor. You're not destroying anything, Myra. You're just refusing to hide the truth anymore. If you're still watching, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a relationship where you gave more than you got back? Where your work, your love, your time just disappeared into someone else's life? If you know that feeling, drop a 7 in the comments. And if you want to see what happened at the grand opening, Subscribe and hit the bell, because what comes next will surprise you. Let me take you back to March 15th, 2023, the day I signed the contract that would eventually change everything. Richard Whitmore's conference room. Same mahogany table. Same portrait of his father. Richard had the contract on the table, 12 pages prepared by Howard Price, the company attorney. He'd clearly expected me to sign without reading. It's standard language, Richard said, waving his hand dismissively. Just protects the company in case of disputes. Not that there would be any. This is family. I picked up the document. I'd like to read it first. Patricia, who'd come to observe, exchanged a glance with Daniel. He shrugged. I read every page, every clause. I'd been doing this for 11 years. I knew what to look for. Page 8, Section 7, Clause 7.3. All designs created by Myra Nolan remain her intellectual property until written approval is granted for commercial use. Approval must be documented via signed consent form prior to publication, distribution, or commercial display of any materials featuring said designs. Standard industry language. Every designer I knew insisted on similar protection. It ensured that clients couldn't use your work until you'd approved the final version and compensation terms. Richard had no idea what he was signing. Why would he? He'd never worked with a professional designer before. His previous projects used contractors who worked for hire, no IP retention. Everything looks fine, I said. Richard smiled, relieved. Good, good. Daniel, witness her signature. Daniel signed without reading. Richard initialed every page without reviewing them. Howard Price filed the contract, and for 18 months, no one at Whitmore Properties thought about Clause 7.3 again. Until I did. The originals lived on my laptop. 312 emails with my name in the header. 47 design files with my watermark. They had assumptions. I had evidence. In the first week of November, I spent 2 evenings doing something I should have done months ago, organizing my evidence. I'd always been meticulous about documentation, a habit Eleanor had drilled into me during my internship. In this business, the paper trail is everything, she'd said. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So I documented. My email folder for the Whitmore Grand project contained 312 messages spanning 18 months. Every single one had the same header. From Myra Nolan, lead interior designer. I'd requested that title specifically. Howard Price had approved it without comment. Every design file I'd ever sent to the Whitmore Properties team was a low-resolution preview, standard practice when working with clients before final approval. High-resolution files were for after the contract was complete, after payment was finalized, after consent was granted. I'd never sent the high-resolution files. Each preview was embedded with a watermark. See Myra Nolan Design, 2023-2024. Light gray, subtle, easily overlooked if you weren't paying attention. The Whitmores hadn't been paying attention, but Tristan Holt's team had. When they'd received the marketing materials for their investor review, someone on Holt's staff had flagged the watermarks. I learned this later, but it explained why Holt had started asking questions at pre-opening events. Who's Myra Nolan? He'd reportedly asked Richard's assistant. The assistant didn't know. I sat in my home office, my hobby corner, and created a folder on my laptop. I labeled it Whitmore Grand, Documentation. Inside, I placed the original signed contract, scanned at high resolution, all 312 emails in PDF format, the original design files at full resolution, a timeline of my work from March 2023 to October 2024. Then I backed up everything to 3 separate cloud drives. If this was going to become a fight, I wouldn't lose it for lack of preparation. Monday, November 4th, 2024. 11 days before the grand opening. My phone rang at 2:15 p.m. Richard Whitmore. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Myra. His voice was clipped, businesslike, the tone he used with vendors who'd disappointed him. We have a problem with the marketing materials. What kind of problem? The design images, there's some sort of watermark on them. Myra Nolan design. It's showing up on all the high-resolution prints. I paused as if considering. That's because I never sent you the high-resolution files without watermarks. Silence. What do you mean, never sent? I sent preview files, low resolution, for review purposes. The final files, the ones without watermarks, require my written approval per clause 7.3 of our contract. Longer silence. Myra. Richard's voice had changed, harder now, controlled. This is a family project. We don't need to get into legal technicalities. The contract is legally binding regardless of whether we're family, Richard. I'm happy to provide the final files once we've discussed proper attribution. Attribution? Credit, for my work. Interior design by Myra Nolan, on all materials. I heard him breathing. This isn't a negotiation, he said finally. We have 200 guests coming in 11 days. Bloomberg is sending a reporter. You will send those files. I'd like to discuss this in person, with my attorney present if needed. Your attorney? Sarah Hartwell at Hartwell & Associates. She specializes in intellectual property. The silence that followed was different, heavier. We'll talk later, Richard said, and hung up. I set my phone down and looked out the window of my home office. For 7 years, Richard Whitmore had seen me as background noise, decoration for his son's life. Now, for the first time, I had his full attention. Daniel came home at 7:45 p.m. that night. He didn't take off his coat. He didn't pour himself a drink. He walked straight to where I was sitting in the living room and stood over me. What the hell are you doing? I set down my book. I'm protecting my work. You're sabotaging my family's business. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm asking for what the contract guarantees me. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he made when he was trying not to yell. Dad called me after he talked to you. He's furious. He thinks you're trying to blackmail us. Blackmail implies I'm asking for something I'm not entitled to. I designed that hotel, Daniel. Every room, every concept. The contract says those designs are mine until I give written approval. So give the approval. After I'm properly credited. Daniel laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Credited? That's what this is about? Your name on a plaque somewhere? My name in the marketing materials, in the press releases, on the official record. Yes. He shook his head. Dad's not going to do that. It dilutes the brand. Then we have a problem. He stepped closer. If you don't give him those files, he'll sue you. For what? Exercising rights I have under a contract he signed? Daniel's jaw tightened. You're going to destroy everything he's built. No, I'm going to be acknowledged for what I built. We stood there, 2 feet apart, in the house we'd shared for 7 years. The house where I'd planned his birthday parties and entertained his friends and made myself smaller every single day so he could feel bigger. This isn't you, Myra. I looked him in the eyes. Maybe this is exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to see it. He slept in the guest room again that night. Saturday, November 9th, 2024, 6 days before the grand opening. The Whitmores hosted a pre-launch reception at Richard's West Hills estate. 40 guests, partners, investors, longtime friends of the family. It was meant to build excitement, to give the inner circle a preview before the main event. I was expected to attend. I was the dutiful daughter-in-law, after all. I wore a black dress I'd bought 3 years ago. Simple, professional. The kind of thing that would fade into the background, which is exactly what the Whitmores expected of me. At 7:30 p.m., Richard took the small stage they'd set up in the living room. The Whitmore Grand represents 18 months of vision and hard work, he said, champagne glass raised. The interior design was executed by our talented in-house team at Whitmore Properties. I felt Eleanor Vance's eyes on me from across the room. She'd come as an industry representative, per her invitation. And we're thrilled to unveil it to the world next Friday. Applause, smiles. No one looked at me. Later, one of the guests, a woman I didn't recognize, approached Daniel and me near the bar. The design photos are stunning, she said. Who was the lead on interiors? Daniel didn't miss a beat. Our in-house team. We're really proud of what they accomplished. The woman nodded and walked away. Daniel didn't even glance at me, but Marcus Webb did. He was standing near the fireplace, bourbon in hand, watching. His expression was unreadable. Later, when I went to get air on the terrace, Eleanor followed. You okay? I'm fine. You don't have to answer now, but next Friday I'll be there. And if you need someone to tell the truth, she touched my arm. I will. I nodded. Thank you, Eleanor. I meant it. It was Patricia who finally said the quiet part out loud. Around 8:45 p.m., she found me near the kitchen. Where else? Refilling my water glass. She'd had 3 glasses of champagne, enough to loosen her filter. Myra, dear. She pulled me into the corner, her manicured nails gripping my elbow a little too tightly. I need to say something to you. A few guests were within earshot, close enough to catch fragments. You should be grateful, Patricia said, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry. Grateful that Richard let you participate in this project at all. Without the Whitmore name, you'd be, what, a decorator in some strip mall? I'm an interior architect. Same thing. She waved her hand dismissively. The point is, without this family, you'd be nobody. And now you're trying to create problems? Over credit? Over acknowledgement of my work. Patricia laughed. Your work, dear, anyone could have done what you did. Richard just felt sorry for you. I felt the blood drain from my face, not from shame, from the effort of staying calm. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Tristan Holt, the lead investor, watching us. His brow was furrowed. I see, I said quietly. Thank you for clarifying your perspective. I'm just saying, know your place. I excused myself and walked to the terrace. Eleanor joined me a moment later. I heard, she said softly. I stared out at the city lights below, Portland, glittering and indifferent. She's wrong, Eleanor said. And she knows she's wrong. That's why she said it loud enough for others to hear. She's trying to control the narrative before you can. She doesn't know what I have. No, she doesn't. Eleanor smiled. But she will. After the party, I didn't go home. I sat in my car in Richard's driveway, engine off, watching guests leave. Daniel was still inside, schmoozing with partners, playing the role of loyal son. I called Sarah Hartwell. It's late, I said. I'm sorry. I told you to call any time. What happened? I told her about the party, about Patricia's comments, about the in-house team branding, and the fact that no one, not one person in that room full of industry people, had been told my name. They're proceeding as if they have the rights, I said. But they don't, do they? They don't. Clause 7.3 is explicit. Without your written approval, any commercial use of those designs is a violation. What does that mean practically? It means if they open that hotel without your consent and use those interiors for marketing, press coverage, investor presentations, anything commercial, you can issue a cease and desist. You can demand removal of all materials, and you can pursue damages. They could just proceed anyway. They could open the doors physically, but if they publicize those interiors without your sign-off, they're exposed, and given the guest list at this opening, journalists, investors, industry leaders, they'll absolutely be publicizing. I closed my eyes. What would you do? I asked. That's not my call. But if I were in your position, I'd ask myself, what do I want when this is over? Revenge? Recognition? Something else? I thought about it. But I want to be acknowledged, publicly. I want my name on my work. And I want them to understand that I'm not optional. I'm essential. Then you know what to do. I ended the call and drove to a hotel downtown. I booked a room with my personal credit card. That night, alone in a king bed with clean sheets and silence, I slept better than I had in months. Friday, November 15th, 2024. 6 o'clock p.m., the Whitmore Grand, Pearl District, Portland. I'd seen the building hundreds of times during construction, but never like this. Tonight, it glowed. Warm light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside, I could see the furniture I'd selected, the color palette I'd designed, the custom light fixtures I'd sourced from a workshop in Bend. Every detail was mine. 200 guests filled the lobby. I recognized faces from the guest list Patricia had made me handwrite: investment bankers, city council members, real estate developers. Journalists from Portland Monthly and Architectural Digest moved through the crowd with notepads and phones. Eleanor Vance stood near the main staircase, looking elegant in a dark green dress. She saw me and gave a small nod. Richard was by the stage, shaking hands, radiating confidence. Patricia circulated with a champagne glass, accepting compliments as if she'd personally selected every throw pillow. Daniel spotted me first. He crossed the lobby in 4 strides. "What are you doing here?" "I'm the lead interior designer. Of course I'm here. Dad said you weren't coming." Dad was mistaken. Daniel grabbed my elbow, steering me toward a quieter corner. "This is not the time for this. Whatever point you're trying to make I'm not making a point. I'm attending a professional event celebrating work I created." "Myra, is there a problem?" He stared at me. For a moment I saw something in his eyes that might have been uncertainty. "Just don't do anything stupid," he said. "I've never done anything stupid, Daniel. That's always been your family's specialty." I pulled my arm free and walked toward Eleanor. The opening ceremony was starting in 30 minutes, and I had a contract in my bag. At 6:32 p.m., Richard Whitmore took the stage. The crowd hushed, champagne glasses lowered. 200 faces turned toward the man who'd built Whitmore Properties from a 2-person office in 1987 to a multi-million-dollar development firm. "Good evening, everyone," Richard began, his voice smooth and practiced. "Welcome to the Whitmore Grand." Applause. This hotel represents 18 months of vision, dedication, and the unwavering commitment of the Whitmore Properties team. Every detail you see tonight, from the custom millwork to the curated art collection to the interior design, was executed by our talented in-house professionals. I stood near the back of the room, laptop bag over my shoulder. Eleanor caught my eye. Her expression was steady, ready. "The Whitmore Grand isn't just a hotel," Richard continued. "It's a statement, a testament to what a family business can achieve when everyone pulls together." He raised his glass. "To the Whitmore Grand, and to the future of Whitmore Properties." The crowd raised their glasses. The applause swelled, then a voice cut through. "Mr. Whitmore." Tristan Holt, the primary investor, $1.8 million. He was standing near the front, hand raised like a student with a question. "I'd like to ask about the interior design credit. The materials your team sent me had a watermark, Myra Nolan Design. Is Ms. Nolan here tonight? I'd love to meet the designer." The room went quiet. Richard's smile flickered. She's a family member. She assisted with some elements of the project." "Assisted?" Tristan frowned. "The watermark was on every design file. That suggests more than assistance." Heads turned. I felt 200 pairs of eyes find me at the back of the room. Richard cleared his throat. "Perhaps Ms. Nolan could clarify," Tristan said, "if she's here." I stepped forward. "I am." I walked through the crowd slowly. People parted. Conversations died. By the time I reached the front of the room, there was no sound except the soft clink of ice in glasses. Richard's face was rigid. Patricia had gone pale. Daniel stared at me like he'd never seen me before. "Thank you, Mr. Holt," I said, my voice steady. "I'd be happy to clarify." I turned to face the crowd. "My name is Myra Nolan. I'm an interior architect with 11 years of experience. I'm also—" I glanced at Daniel, "the daughter-in-law of Richard Whitmore." Murmurs rippled through the room. "Over the past 14 months, I served as the lead interior designer for the Whitmore Grand. That included 2,400 hours of design work, 47 unique room concepts, and 312 emails coordinating with vendors, contractors, and the Whitmore Properties team. I opened my laptop bag and pulled out a printed document. On March 15, 2023, I signed a contract with Whitmore Properties. That contract included Clause 7.3, which states, and I'll quote, "All designs created by Myra Nolan remain her intellectual property until written approval is granted for commercial use." I held up the contract. Richard Whitmore's signature was clearly visible. This contract was signed by Richard Whitmore as CEO and witnessed by Daniel Whitmore. To date, I have not provided written approval for commercial use of my designs. The silence was absolute. "I'm not here to cause problems," I continued. "I'm here to state facts. Every piece of design you see tonight, every room, every fixture, every color palette, is my work. And under the terms of the contract Mr. Whitmore signed, I have the legal right to control how that work is used." I lowered the contract. I believe in giving credit where it's due. I'm hoping Mr. Whitmore does too. Before Richard could respond, another voice rose from the crowd. "May I add something?" Eleanor Vance stepped forward, elegant and composed. At 62, she'd spent 4 decades in this industry. Everyone in the room who mattered knew her name. "For those who don't know me," she said, "I'm Eleanor Vance. I served 2 terms as president of the Oregon Society of Interior Architects. I've been Myra Nolan's mentor since she was an intern, 11 years ago." She moved to stand beside me. In 2021, Architectural Digest named Myra a rising voice in boutique hospitality design. She was one of only 12 designers nationwide to receive that recognition. Eleanor pulled out her phone and held it up. "I have the article here, if anyone would like to verify." She swiped to another screen. "Here's a LinkedIn post I made after Myra spoke at our annual conference in 2023. Quote, 'Proud of my former mentee, one of the most talented designers I've had the privilege to work with.'" The journalists were writing furiously now. I saw the Architectural Digest reporter typing on her phone. "I've followed this project since Myra told me about it 18 months ago," Eleanor continued. "I've seen the concepts. I've reviewed the designs. Every element of this hotel's interior is her original work. That's not opinion. That's professional assessment from someone who's been evaluating design work for 40 years. She turned to Richard. "Mr. Whitmore, with respect, I don't know what happened behind closed doors in your family. But in my professional judgment, failing to credit the designer of record for a project of this scale isn't just an oversight. It's an ethical violation." The room exploded in whispers. Tristan Holt stood up. "I think we need a conversation," he said. "Tonight, in private." The next 15 minutes were chaos in slow motion. Tristan Holt crossed the room and shook my hand. "Ms. Nolan, I invested $1.8 million in this project. I was told Whitmore Properties handled all aspects of design. This is the first I'm hearing about an outside contractor with IP retention." "I'm not a contractor, Mr. Holt. I'm family," which is apparently why they assumed I'd work for free and stay invisible. Holt's jaw tightened. He turned to Richard. "We need to review the documentation immediately, all of it. Every contract, every agreement. If there are unresolved IP issues, I'm pausing the Phase 2 investment until they're resolved." Richard's face had gone from red to ashen. "Tristan, this is a misunderstanding." "This isn't a misunderstanding," Holt interrupted. "This is a due diligence failure." The Portland Monthly reporter appeared at my elbow. "Ms. Nolan, can we schedule an interview? I'd like to understand the full scope of your involvement." "Of course." Across the room, Patricia was whispering frantically to a group of family friends, doing damage control. Daniel stood frozen by the stage, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Shock, maybe? Or something more complicated? Marcus Webb was there too, watching from the periphery. His face wasn't smug or dismissive like the others. He looked thoughtful. Eleanor touched my arm. "You did it." "I told the truth, that's all. That's everything." Richard finally found his voice. Perhaps we should take this discussion somewhere private. I think the discussion should stay public, I said calmly. At least the part about who designed this hotel. The business details can be private. I turned to the crowd. I hope you enjoy the Whitmore Grand tonight. Everything you see is exactly as I designed it. Then I walked toward the conference room where my future would be decided. If you ever dreamed about standing up and telling the truth, even a small truth, type truth in the comments below. I want to hear your story. And if you want to know what happened in that conference room and why Marcus called me crying at 2 a.m. 2 weeks later, don't go anywhere. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the next part might just change how you see everything. The conference room on the second floor of the Whitmore Grand had 12-foot ceilings and a view of the Willamette River. I designed this room too. The warm walnut paneling, the brass fixtures, the statement chandelier. Now it was the site of my negotiation. Present: Richard Whitmore, Daniel Whitmore, Howard Price, the company attorney, Tristan Holt, Sarah Hartwell, my attorney, and me. Richard sat at the head of the table out of habit. No one challenged him. Sarah spoke first. My client has 3 conditions for providing written consent under Clause 7.3. She slid a printed document across the table. First, all marketing materials, press releases, signage, and official documentation for the Whitmore Grand must credit interior design by Myra Nolan, lead designer. Richard's face twitched. Second, Mr. Richard Whitmore will issue a written apology to all guests present tonight, acknowledging the oversight in attribution. This apology will be sent via email within 48 hours. Patricia was going to have a stroke. Third, compensation for design services at market rate. Based on comparable projects, my client is owed $180,000. Howard Price leaned forward. She worked pro bono. It was a family arrangement. There's no documentation of pro bono terms, Sarah replied. The contract specifies design services. It doesn't specify compensation waiver. Under standard industry practice, the fair market rate applies. Tristan Holt cleared his throat. I'd like to see this resolved tonight. If Ms. Nolan's conditions are reasonable, I'd encourage Whitmore Properties to accept them. Richard looked at his attorney. Howard nodded slowly. If we don't agree, Richard asked. I spoke for the first time. Then I withhold consent. You cannot legally use my designs for any commercial purpose, and I pursue damages. Silence. I kept my voice calm. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm asking to be treated like a professional. Richard looked like a man whose bluff had been called. He turned to Howard. Can she actually do this? Howard removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a stalling tactic I recognized from watching him in meetings. Clause 7.3 is unambiguous. She retains IP rights until written approval. We cannot compel her to grant that approval. But she's family. Family status doesn't override contract law. Tristan Holt leaned forward, his voice harder now. Richard, I need to be clear. I invested $1.8 million in this project, based on representations about your team's capabilities. Learning tonight that your lead designer was an unpaid family member whose work you plan to take credit for, that raises serious concerns about transparency. Tristan, I was prepared to invest another $2.1 million in Phase 2. That's now on hold pending a full audit of your business practices. Richard's face drained of color. Tristan continued, however, if you resolve this fairly tonight, compensate Ms. Nolan, acknowledge her publicly, demonstrate good faith, I may reconsider. The room was silent. Daniel, who had said nothing for 15 minutes, finally spoke. Dad, just do it. Richard turned to him sharply. Excuse me? She's right, Daniel glanced at me, something complicated in his expression. We took advantage of her. You know we did. Just make it right. I didn't know what to make of that. It was the first time in 7 years Daniel had taken my side against his father. Richard sat very still for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fine, We accept the conditions. Sarah slid the consent form across the table. My client will sign this after the apology email is sent and the first payment installment is confirmed. I looked at Richard. He couldn't meet my eyes. For the first time in 7 years, I felt like I existed. By 10:15 p.m., the paperwork was done. Richard's assistant drafted the apology email in the conference room, with Sarah reviewing every line. It was sent to all 200 guests at 10:47 p.m., technically within hours, not 48, which felt like a small victory. The email read, "Dear friends and partners, on behalf of Whitmore Properties, I want to acknowledge an oversight in tonight's presentation. The interior design of the Whitmore Grand was created by Myra Nolan, lead interior designer, whose 14 months of dedicated work brought our vision to life. We regret that her contribution was not properly recognized during this evening's remarks. Ms. Nolan's professionalism and talent are a credit to the hospitality design industry. Sincerely, Richard Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Properties." I read it 3 times. It wasn't warm, it wasn't heartfelt, but it was public, and it was permanent. I signed the consent form at 11:02 p.m. As I handed the document to Howard, Tristan Holt extended his hand to me. "Ms. Nolan, I'm impressed by how you handled this. Not many people would have the documentation, the composure, and the fortitude." "Thank you. I'm developing a property in Seattle, boutique hotel, 60 rooms. We're looking for a lead designer." He handed me his card. "Different budget, different partners. No Whitmores involved." I looked at the card. "Tristan Holt, Holt Capital Partners." "I'll call you." "Please do." As I packed my laptop and documents, Daniel caught my arm. "Myra." I waited. He faltered. "Are you coming home?" I looked at him for a long moment. "I don't think so, Daniel. Not tonight." I walked out of the conference room, down the staircase I'd designed, through the lobby I'd conceptualized, and into the November night. I'd won. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within 3 days, Richard's apology email had been screenshotted, shared, and dissected across Portland's real estate community. His carefully worded oversight convinced no one. By November 20th, Portland Monthly published their coverage, "The Whitmore Grand, Behind the Glamour, a Family's Disregard for Its Own." The article quoted multiple guests from the opening. It included my statement, carefully vetted by Sarah, and Eleanor Vance's professional assessment. It noted Tristan Holt's concerns about transparency. 12,000 shares in the first week. The comment sections were brutal. By November 25th, 3 development firms that had been in preliminary talks with Whitmore Properties quietly withdrew from discussions. Their emails cited concerns about business practices and the need for partners whose values align with ours. Tristan Holt formally reduced his Phase 2 investment from $2.1 million to $800,000. His letter to Richard stated that trust had been materially compromised. Richard blamed Daniel. "Your wife destroyed us," he reportedly said during a family dinner I wasn't invited to. "Everything I built, she burned it down." Daniel, according to Marcus, who told me this later, didn't defend me. But he didn't agree either. He just sat there staring at his plate. Patricia posted a long message on Facebook about family loyalty and people who don't understand what it means to work together. It received 92 reactions, mostly from other women in the West Hills social circle. I didn't respond. Sarah did, with a formal cease and desist letter regarding any implication that I had acted improperly or illegally. Patricia deleted the post within 4 hours. By December 1st, my first installment, $60,000, hit my bank account. $120,000 more to come. I looked at the deposit notification for a long time. It was exactly what I was owed. Why did it feel like it wasn't enough? In the 2 weeks after the grand opening, Daniel and I lived in the same house like strangers. He slept in the guest room. I slept in our bedroom, which suddenly felt like mine alone. We passed each other in the kitchen without speaking. We split the mail without eye contact. On November 28th, he finally tried to have a conversation. "Are you happy now?" he asked. "You got your money. You got your name on the materials. Was it worth it?" I was making coffee. I didn't turn around. Worth what? Destroying my family's reputation, my father's legacy. I turned then. "I didn't destroy anything, Daniel. I told the truth. Your family's reputation was built on taking credit for other people's work. That's not my fault. It's family. That's how families work. That's how your family works. It's not how I want to live." He shook his head. "You've changed." No, I finally stopped pretending I hadn't. That night, I packed a bag. 3 suitcases, 2 boxes of books, and my laptop. Everything I needed. I rented a furnished apartment in the Alberta Arts District. A 1-bedroom with hardwood floors and north-facing windows that caught the morning light. I didn't file for divorce. Not yet. That felt like a door I wasn't ready to close. But I didn't go back to that house. On my first night alone, I sat on the floor of my empty living room with a glass of wine and my phone. I had 17 new emails, 3 from journalists, 2 from potential clients, 1 from Eleanor, and 1 from Tristan Holt's office, asking if I was available for a preliminary meeting about the Seattle project. I looked around my quiet apartment. For the first time in 7 years, the silence felt like peace. Friday, November 29th, 2024, 2:07 a.m. My phone lit up in the darkness. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, half watching a documentary about architecture in Copenhagen. I fumbled for the phone without looking at the screen. "Hello?" "Myra." The voice was hoarse, shaky. "It's Marcus." Marcus Webb, Daniel's best friend, the man who'd watched me be humiliated at parties for 7 years without saying a word. "It's 2 in the morning, Marcus." "I know. I'm sorry. His voice cracked. "I needed to tell you something." I sat up. "Are you okay?" "I was at Tyler's tonight, with Daniel. They were drinking, a lot, and Daniel started talking." I waited. "He said," Marcus took a breath. "He said he always knew you were better than him, more talented, more accomplished. He said he knew the whole time." My chest tightened. "He said he was scared," Marcus continued, "that if he admitted it, if he gave you credit, he'd look small, like he'd married up and everyone would know it. So he kept you down. On purpose. He said he'd been doing it since the beginning." I closed my eyes. "And his father?" "His father told him to. Years ago. Richard said, 'Never let her get bigger than the family. Control the narrative.' Daniel's been following that playbook since you got engaged." The room was very quiet. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I watched it happen. For years. And I never said anything." His voice broke. "I'm sorry, Myra. I was part of it. I laughed at those jokes. I looked the other way." "Why now?" "Because tonight, watching Daniel fall apart, I realized I was just like him. Too scared to do the right thing." He paused. "You deserved better. From all of us." I stared at the ceiling for a long time. "Thank you, Marcus." I meant it. Monday, December 2nd, 2024. I met Tristan Holt at his office in the U.S. Bancorp Tower, 23rd floor corner suite with views of Mount Hood. "Ms. Nolan," he shook my hand firmly, "thank you for coming." "Thank you for inviting me." We sat at a small conference table. Tristan slid a folder across to me. "The Cascade House, 60-room boutique hotel in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, ground-up construction, target opening, fall 2026. I opened the folder. Renderings, floor plans, market analysis. Budget for interior design, $350,000. Full creative control, your name on everything. Contracts, marketing, signage. Non-negotiable. I looked up. "Why me?" "Because I saw how you handled the Whitmore Grand." He leaned back. "You had the documentation. You had the composure. And when you were pushed, you didn't crumble or lash out. You stated facts and held your ground. That's rare. I almost didn't. But you did. That's what matters. I looked at the folder again. $350,000, full credit, complete independence. I'll need to review the contracts with my attorney. Of course, take whatever time you need. I don't need much. I closed the folder. I'm very interested, Mr. Holt. Tristan. Tristan. He smiled. A genuine smile, not the practiced kind I'd seen from the Whitmores for 7 years. I think this could be the start of something good, Myra. That evening I called Eleanor. They want me, I said. Full creative control, 350,000. Of course they do. I could hear her smiling. You're exceptional. You just needed someone to see it who wasn't trying to keep you invisible. I hung up and started sketching. For the first time in years, I was designing for myself. It felt like breathing. Saturday, December 7th, 2024. Daniel came to my apartment. He'd texted first, unusual for him, and asked if we could talk. I agreed, against my better judgment. Some conversations need to happen in person. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. The man who'd always been so careful about appearances looked like he'd stopped caring. You look tired, I said. I haven't been sleeping. He sat on my second-hand couch, a far cry from the $8,000 sectional we'd had in our house. Myra, I want to try again. I'd expected this. What would that look like? I'd change. I'd do better. You said that 3 years ago, after you forgot my birthday for the second time. You said it 2 years ago when I asked you to acknowledge my work at the company holiday party. You said it last year when I told you I felt invisible in our marriage. He was silent. How many times do I hear, "I'll change," before I get to believe it? This time is different. Why? Because I almost lost you. I looked at him, this man I'd loved for 7 years, who'd promised to cherish me and instead had diminished me, piece by piece, until I barely recognized myself. If you want things to be different, I said slowly, you need to do the work. Real work, therapy, with a professional, for at least 6 months. Consistent attendance, genuine effort. Therapy? Yes, I'm not your teacher, Daniel. I'm not going to teach you how to respect me. You need to figure that out yourself. He stared at the floor. And if I do that, you'll come back? I'm not making promises, but I won't close the door completely. I paused. I'm also not waiting. I have my own life to build. He nodded slowly. It was the first honest conversation we'd had in years. A month after the grand opening, I sat in my apartment and looked back at everything. The city lights of Portland sparkled outside my window, a different view than from the Whitmore house, but one I'd chosen for myself. I thought about what I'd learned. First, silence isn't peace. For 7 years, I'd kept quiet to maintain harmony, but there was no harmony, only the illusion of it, built on my willingness to shrink. Real peace comes from truth, even when truth is uncomfortable. Second, boundaries aren't cruelty. Setting limits on how people treat you isn't an act of aggression, it's an act of self-respect. The Whitmores called me selfish for wanting credit, but wanting credit for your own work isn't selfish, it's sane. Third, your value doesn't depend on recognition. I'd spent years waiting for Daniel, for Richard, for Patricia to see me, but my designs were excellent whether they acknowledged it or not. The world saw me at that opening, not because the Whitmores introduced me, but because I introduced myself. My phone buzzed. An email from Architectural Digest. Dear Ms. Nolan, we're preparing a feature on emerging designers in boutique hospitality. Given recent events, we'd love to interview you about your work on the Whitmore Grand and your upcoming projects. Would you be available next week? Best regards, Catherine Wells, Senior Editor, Architectural Digest. I read it twice. 3 months ago, no one at that magazine knew my name. Now they were asking for an interview. I typed my reply. Dear Catherine, I would be delighted. Please let me know your availability. Best, Myra Nolan, interior architect. I hit send and smiled. I hadn't won the Whitmore's respect, but somewhere along the way, I'd stopped needing it. I'd won something better. I'd won my own. It's December now. The Seattle project is moving forward. I signed the contract last week. Full creative control, my name on everything. Tristan's team has been professional, communicative, and respectful. They ask for my opinions. They listen to my answers. It's a strange feeling after 7 years with the Whitmores. I'm speaking at the Pacific Northwest Design Conference in February. Eleanor arranged the invitation. About time, she said. You've been ready for years. Everyone else is just catching up. Daniel started therapy. Marcus told me, we text occasionally now, a strange development I didn't anticipate. Apparently, Daniel goes every Thursday at 4 p.m. He hasn't missed a session yet. I haven't decided what that means for us. I'm not in a hurry. The Whitmore Grand is doing well, according to industry news. 87% occupancy in the first month. Reviews praise the stunning interior design by Myra Nolan, lead designer. They updated all the materials, as promised. Sometimes I drive past the hotel on my way to my studio. I look at the warm glow through those windows, my concept, my work, and I feel something complicated. Pride, mostly. Some sadness. A little anger that I had to fight so hard for what should have been freely given. But mostly, I feel free. This morning I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and said something I haven't said in years. You're worthy. Not because they finally see you, because you always were. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, the invisible one, the unacknowledged one, the one who keeps giving while they keep taking, I want to tell you something. Your value isn't determined by the people who refuse to see it. You don't have to shrink to make them comfortable. You are allowed to take up space. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply tell the truth. If this story touched you, please leave a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this. I want to know, do you think Myra should give Daniel a second chance? Or should she keep building her own path? Comment below. I read everything. And if you want more stories like this, check out the video in the description. Thank you for staying until the end. You're worthy too.